Okay, well, good morning to my pre-algebra students on Tuesday. Today is March 31st. Make sure you're in the right video. We are doing 13.2 in your pre-algebra. So good morning to you, Georgie and Olivia. Glad that you're able to join us. So let's talk about area of parallelograms. Make sure you have your book open and you're taking notes. We're on page 544. In your book, and let's just review really quickly what area is. So remember, we've been talking about perimeter in our last chapter, and perimeter was the distance around the outside. So this is how much fencing we need, how much trim we need. Okay, but when we're talking about, I'm going to underline rim, so remember the rim or the outside. But when we're talking about area, we're discussing how much in between. Okay, so how much grass needs to be laid or how much carpet needs to be laid. So we're covering the inside. So I hope you see the difference between perimeter and area. Okay, so when we do area, we always break it up into squares to measure anything. So I hope this is a good review for you. So I'm going to break it up into squares and see how many square units I have. We'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So this is 12 square units. So remember, whenever we do area, we're talking about squares. Okay? Now, if I'm talking about a rectangle and I want to define this, and I didn't have my squares drawn to count up, remember that I could say that, well, there are 2 on this side, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on this side. So the area of a rectangle is just the length times the width, right? And so you get 6 times 2 equals 12 square units. Okay, so that's a little bit of review and area that you have. Now, as we move into pre-algebra, we won't be calling this length and width anymore. Okay, so the area of a rectangle when we're using pre-algebra terms is the base times the height. So the area of a rectangle equals the base times the height. Okay, so let's look back here at our problem. What is the base? The base is the bottom that it sits on. So this is the base, and then of course it's height. This is the height. Okay, so in algebra we'll be saying the area of a rectangle is the base times the height. You might go ahead and write that one down. Okay, now the area of a square, if you'll remember, let me change this into a square. Okay, remember a square is the same distance on one side as it is the other. So we could say 2 times 2 is 4. But in pre-algebra, we're going to say, well, the area of a square are its side squared. Isn't that what we did? Well, what is the distance of a side? Well, it's 2. What is 2 squared? 2 times 2 is 4. Okay? So the area of a square is its side squared. Okay, now let's look at just a parallelogram. Okay, because if you remember, a parallelogram does not necessarily mean that it's a rectangle. So here's an example of a parallelogram. Remember, a parallelogram, this side is parallel to this side, and this side's parallel to this side. So when we find the area of a parallelogram, it's not quite as easy because the length of the side here is not actually the height of the shape. You see, the height is actually right here. Okay? So when we have, if you'll look there on page 545, we'll find the formula for the area of a parallelogram. okay, equals the base times the height. Now notice that's the same as a rectangle, okay? But the question is how do we find this? You're going to be so tempted to say that this is the height. But if this was a person and they were leaning over this way and they stand up straight, notice how I get taller. If I'm slanted, is that my real height? Or is this my real height? So what we want is we want to draw a perpendicular line that meets the base at a 90-degree angle, and this becomes our height and this is our base. Okay? So, for example, let's look at 1. Well, let's not go quite to 1 yet. So if this was a 3, and this was a 2, and this was a 5, how would we find the area of this parallelogram? Don't be tempted to use the 3. It doesn't actually even matter, okay? The 2 is the actual height. Okay, so we would say that the area equals the base times the height, 2. Okay, so the area equals 10 square units. Okay, so let's move on to example 1. Find the area of the following quadrilaterals. A square that's 4.2 centimeters on a side. So for example 1, we want to find a square. So I'm going to look right here at this formula. That's 4.2 centimeters. So I'm going to take my area equals 4.2, and what do I do to that side? I square it. Okay? So what is the problem I'm putting in my calculator? Well, I can either put 4.2 squared or 4.2 times 4.2. Okay? When you put that in your calculator, you should have gotten 17.64. Now look at in your problem on your example, it's 4.2 what? Centimeters. Now we can say square centimeters like this, or we can say centimeters squared. Okay, let's move on to example 1b. So in example 1b, it says a rectangle with sides of 8.5 inches and 4 inches. Go ahead and put the inches in there. Okay, so if I look at my rectangle, it's a parallelogram, isn't it? It's the same. So I'm going to say that my area equals my base times my height. Now in this case, does it matter which one we assume is the base or the height? No, it doesn't, because we're multiplying, so it doesn't matter which way they go in. Okay, so 8.5 times 4. Go ahead and pop that into your calculator. And you should get 34 inches squared. Okay, let's look at example 2. Example 2 says, find the area of the parallelogram. And you see the picture of the parallelogram. And it says this one is 6.6 meters, this one is 8 meters, and this one is 12 meters. Well, how do we find the area of this parallelogram? Well, the area of a parallelogram is base times the height. So the area equals the base, which is 12, times the height. Which one is the height? 6.6. So go ahead and pop that in your calculator. You should get that the area equals 79.2 meters squared. Okay, let's move on to the next page to example 3. Example 3 says, find the height of a rectangle that is 6 meters long. So we know that the base is 6 meters long, and that the area is 75. So I'm just going to draw myself a little picture here. And then I'm going to think, well, now they've given me the area and they've given me the base. So I need to write an algebraic equation. Area equals the base times the height. Well, what is the area? I can plug that in. 75 equals 6h. Do you agree with that? Okay. Well, now I need to solve for h. And I know you guys like to switch our equation and put it on the left side. We can do that first. How do I get rid of the h? Well, it's a multiplication, so I'm going to do the opposite. And I'm going to divide both sides by 6. So h equals, go ahead and pop that into your calculator. Hope you can see that all the way to the end. And you should have gotten 12.5 meters. Now, would I put meters squared here? No, because I'm just doing the outside. I'm trying to find this height, 12.5 meters. Okay, and you guys have completed the examples, so if you have any questions about any of these, go ahead and Marco Polo me before you get started. That way you can get some questions answered before you dive in. I want you to do your exercises. Let's do 1 through 27. Okay, and there's some challenging ones where you kind of remember if you have a shape like this. Okay, I would want to find the area, I would want to draw a line, and I would want to find this area, and then I would want to find this area, and I would want to add them together. If I had a shape like this, and I said, tell me the area of the shaded shape, well, I would want to find the area of this large square, of the shaded, and then I would want to find the area of the white square, and I would want to subtract, because the area of the big one minus the area of the non-shaded will give me the total area of just the shaded. So I hope that gives you a hint on how to do those, but be sure to Marco Polo me back if you need any help.